24, 25, although she's still good looking. She keeps marrying people who cheat on her. Billy Joel cheated on her, and her other husband cheated on her, so I don't know. Maybe there's something wrong with her. Who knows? This shows you good looks on them. Sometimes it means the opposite. Sometimes it means people like Paris Hilton, that they think they're, I don't think Paris Hilton's that good looking, but they think that they can get away with anything and don't have to be smart or have a good personality because they're attractive. Guys do this stuff too. George Clooney, Brad Pitt, aren't the smartest guys in the world. They get roles because they're good looking. Although Brad Pitt's somewhat talented. George Clooney's actually from a celebrity family. His aunt is Rosemary Clooney. People love him though. I forgot to sign this thing next time. That's not the right one. That's my other class. You're going to have to wait.
No, I know. I'm just saying. I forgot to sign it.
All right. Well, after class. Okay. All right. So we're going to quickly look at these elements of culture. So here are some of the questions, and in the future as well, about culture and American culture and culture in general here. We talked last time. Is there a majority culture in America? If there is, what does it look like? A lot of people suggest that the majority culture in America is basically white suburban America. Don't know about that. If you look at the media, it presents a different picture. It's a much more diverse picture to some extent. And the bigger issue is if there is a majority or a mainstream of American culture, then what does that mean for people who fit or who are not in the mainstream, who don't fit within those definitions? Are they just doomed to have obstacles thrown up in their path? Are they going to struggle a lot? You know, is American culture going to change and be more accepting? Certainly, I think American culture, with the election of President Barack Obama, at least at the very minimum, showed that people are willing to look at race as not the sole factor in people's abilities. So that's one positive for American culture. But let's face it, the mainstream of American culture still is dominant, and it is predominantly white and middle class, and it sets the tone for just about everything in society, including people's musical taste to some extent, although certainly hip-hop, rap, and other types of music that come out of non-white environments certainly are very popular as well. But let's face it, look at the leading ladies and leading men in Hollywood. What do they look like? Remember, we talked about Denzel Washington. Did we talk about Denzel Washington, how he won the Academy Awards? About playing a crooked cop who made a white cop smoke PCP-laced weed so he could steal money from a white drug dealer and shoot him in the chest. That's why he won that award. And Halle Berry won it for being like an ignorant waitress who had an affair with a racist white guy. Who was wasn't he a prison security guard? Remember was it Monster Ball? But she won an Academy Award for that, right? I think the worst part probably had been writhing around on the floor naked with Billy Bob Thornton. And I would like to say to Angelina Jolie, do you need glasses? Because you married Billy Bob Thornton. But you refused to marry Brad Pitt. Ladies, does that make sense to you? That doesn't. I'm a man, and that makes no sense. You know, it's like divorcing Catherine Zeta-Jones and marrying a sea hag or something. I mean, or a stripper or something. Anyway, so subcultures and mainstream culture is important here. You know, what does it matter? And is it changing over time? One of the things that is occurring is, even 20 years ago, Latino people only made up about 6 to 7% of the population. They now make up 15% of the population. It actually includes many of the Mexican Americans who either are just are workers, foreign workers in this country, or are illegally here working because they've been offered jobs by many times white employers. Many times in landscaping and fast food. The real percentage of the population that has probably a Latino or a Hispanic background is probably around 18 to 19%. They are now the #2 largest group by racial category in the United States, and they're not by any means homogenous. Don't tell a Puerto Rican they're the same as the Dominican. You want to start a fight, you can go ahead and say that kind of crap. You confuse a Costa Rican for a Nicaraguan, you're going to have some problems too. And I think that one of the things that the American media presents is that the word Latin and Asian mean like the same thing, like that, or not in the sense that they mean the same groups, but if you say Latin, it means all these groups, and there's very little difference if it's Mexican or Ecuadorian, and I'm telling you right now, because I've studied Latin America. That's absolutely not the case. Argentina is completely different than Brazil. Brazil, 45% of the people there trace their heritage back to Africa. They're black, essentially. Okay, and people don't think of Latin Americans as being black or white. There's plenty of white people in places like Ecuador or Mexico. Okay, Spanish people from Spain, especially from northern Spain, do not consider themselves to be non-white. Okay, although I doubt Hitler would have considered them to be white. But who's taking advice from him, right? Same with Asian. You're telling me that people from India and Thailand are the same? So there's a lot of stupidity that goes on the categorization, but it is important to understand the different percentages of Asian people as a category, and it includes a lot of different groups, make up 4 to 5% of the American public. African Americans, which again are from all different parts of Africa, and many of them whose families have been here for 300 to 400 years and were former slaves, and many people like me, as well as black people, have mixed racial backgrounds. I actually am 1/64th African. I know that's hard for people to believe. But I am the descendant, I know that's hard for people to believe, especially with the blue eyes and stuff. I am the descendant of Peter Jefferson, who is Thomas Jefferson's father, and one of his slaves. Her name was Jemima Jefferson. They don't name white people Jemima in Wales and stuff like that. It's from that. So, and we've looked up her background, and she's not listed as one of Peter Jefferson's daughters. She's actually Thomas Jefferson's half-sister. Okay. Thomas Jefferson actually had an affair with Sally Heming, who was his wife's half-sister and her slave. I'm not kidding. This shows you, and they just said today that Obama and President Bush were related. Look back in your history. Race is not as clear-cut as people think it is. Seriously.
Wait, you said Obama and Bush are related?
Hillary Clinton's related to Angelina Jolie somehow. Dick Cheney and Obama are related. I'm not kidding you. Look it up. I'm making this stuff up. Well, I wouldn't make something that stupid up because somebody would look it up online. Anybody on the computer, look it up. Look up Obama and Cheney have a distant relative. I almost guarantee you it'll come up. I know it's weird. It's on his mom's side of the family. And his mom was white. So, Michelle Obama found out she had a white ancestor. So again, we need to look at the history, all these racial categories. They do matter, but I think people are much closer to each other than they want to realize. Race is a big part of our identity, no doubt about it. It's a part of how we view ourselves. But I would submit to you that there is also a socially constructed element to race that neutralizes its importance to some extent, because one of the things that race does is it divides people. The early United States made it very clear about how white settlers viewed African Americans. They viewed them as animals, like pack animals. I guess until Thomas Jefferson wanted to make love to one, and then all of a sudden they were human. And it's funny to me that the man who wrote All Men Are Created Equal, and I know he didn't say women, but that would hold, he had 200 slaves, Thomas Jefferson had 200 slaves. I don't know how to reconcile that. Washington had slaves. They're fighting for freedom? You know? Anyway. So the person who wrote the Declaration of Independence was owning people. Anyway, but the importance is here that race matters in America. There's no doubt about it. Whether you look at your background as being mixed or solidly one race or another, did you find it?
Yeah.
What did it say?
It's from 8 generations ago.
See? But they're related.
Yeah.
See what you learn? Keep like, this is what I want to do. If you use a computer, keep like Wikipedia open. That way we can check facts and stuff like that. I think that's interesting because the internet allows us to do. Sometimes we can't always type these things. Anyway, but number 3, does this cause cultural conflict? In what ways? Religious, political, racial, gender-based conflict. For example, what the majority of people in this country are Christian. What if you're Jewish or atheist or Buddhist or Hindu or Muslim? You're out of the mainstream, aren't you? Have we ever had a Buddhist president? Are we ever going to have a Buddhist president in the next 100 years, probably? You know Tiger Woods is Buddhist. Remember when he apologized? I almost think that people were more a lot of people out in the audience that were watching this thing were more shocked that they were like, he was like, I forgot my Buddhist roots. Which, to me, I'm pretty open with religion. So, as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't bother me. But for a lot of Americans, Christian Americans, Buddhism is a cult. And it's a paganist religion. It's silly. It makes no sense. And when they heard Tiger Woods say he was a Buddhist, I bet a lot of Americans were, what? You're a Buddhist? Oh man, strike two. You only get one more strike. To show you how important religion is, first of all, Mitt Romney's a Mormon. He's going to get pounded about this. Secondarily, there's no way the United States, and the Gallup poll data confirms this, only 8% of the American people said they'd vote for an atheist. On top of that, 25% of people still think Obama is a Muslim. And this bothers them. And I'll tell you right now, do you think a Muslim could get even close to the nomination in this country? What would they be called? Yep. To show you how important even ethnicity is, have we had an Italian-American president?
I think so.
No. Why not? What do they get accused of when they run for president? And they're Catholic. That doesn't help either. How many Catholic presidents we had?
Just Kennedy, right?
Yeah, it ain't even Christianity. They slice it up into little pieces of Christianity. Like there ain't enough division in this world. You gotta have Baptists and Methodists fighting each other. It's like, what the hell is going on here? You almost think that if you didn't know better about religion, you'd think it's meant to divide and cause conflict and not, I mean, is that, if you read the Judeo-Christian doctrine, is that what religion is about? Conflict and divide? What's it? Let me put it this way. Those of you who read the Bible, did Jesus discriminate against people based on their religion? No. Remember he healed the Roman soldier's servant? Remember that? And his Jewish friends came up and said, what the hell are you doing, dude? You hanging out with hookers, thieves, turning water into wine? And now you're healing a Roman soldier's servant? What the hell are you doing? Why are you hanging out with pagans? Okay, so again, it's so interesting, though, that religion divides people when its basic philosophy is supposed to be unite people, right? And stop animosity, supposedly, you know? Like Buddhism, for example, seeks peace. You're not going to see, the only thing that Buddhists have ever done that was violent was catch themselves on fire in a revolutionary suicide and protest against the Vietnam War and other stuff. When have you ever seen a Buddhist terrorist? It's not going to happen, you know? Just like you're also never going to see probably, you're not very, because it's, you know, there are certain sections of Islam that, small segments, zealots, that believe that committing revolutionary suicide will get you into heaven. There's not a lot of Christians who believe that, is there? What do Catholics and Protestants believe happens to you when you commit suicide? That's right. And you don't pass go, and you don't collect $200, and you don't get to see your friends and family. You go straight to hell, where the devil stabs you with a pitchfork and throws you in a lake of fire, and you have to hang out with Hitler and Stalin and a whole bunch of other people which probably wouldn't like. Anyway, also gender as well. All these things divide people to some extent, but they also give the culture its diversity. Number 4, impact of globalization on the spread of American culture. This is a big concern for other countries. The French don't like this. They cannot stand to see American programming. The number 2 export we have in the United States and other countries besides France, China doesn't like it, Russia doesn't like it. The number 2 export we have to other countries, number 1 is food. The number 2 export is entertainment material. One of the top 5 grossing films, it used to be the top grossing film of all time in Japan. Anybody want to take a guess at it? It's not a Japanese film. Think Leonardo DiCaprio.
Pearl Harbor? No,
Nope. Titanic. That's not, there's no Japanese people in that movie. Having said that, there are some movies from Japan that come up here using anime, like that Spirited Away movie. Remember that movie? And that one about the flying castle? And I think that was Japanese. So, and let's face it, Japanese video games are some of the best in the world, aren't they? Japanese designed video games, right? I mean, everything Nintendo makes is essentially designed in Japan. So, you know, Sony is a Japanese company. You know, I mean, I don't know who. I think it was Activision that came up with Modern Warfare and all that, or Call of Duty and stuff. But still, those are inspired by, like, Super Mario Brothers. That was created in Japanese engineering and stuff like that. Somebody tried to tell me that somebody was on acid that made that game. It makes sense. Eating mushrooms, shooting fireballs, attacking dragons. I mean, my God. I mean, you have to. If you're not on something, you probably need to be in a cell, you know, or you just have a crazy imagination. You know, some people are just that way. It's not necessarily a dangerous thing. But also, not only the spread of American culture that is being absorbed, but it's being pushed on. Some people call this cultural imperialism. That other countries are being forced to adopt American cultural values and ideas. And if you actually look at what's going on in China right now, more and more Chinese young people are professing, and this is the same thing's happening in India too, are professing ideas similar to the materialistic aspects of the American dream. I want a big house, I want millions of dollars, I want a car, I want all this electronic equipment. And the problem with that is, can anybody tell me what the problem with that is, if the rest of the world consumed and had as much stuff as Americans did? What's the problem with that? The United States, the average American consumes 5 to 6 times what a Chinese person consumes. What's that mean if everybody in the world, all 7 billion people, consumed as much stuff as 300 million people in the United States did? What would that do to the environment? It's going to destroy it. They've estimated that we'd need 5 planet Earths. So either one of two things is going to happen. Either Chinese people and Indian people and maybe even Americans are going to start to change their consumption habits, or we're going to start recycling more, or we're all going to be buried in trash and won't be able to breathe air, and there won't be any water to drink. Let's hope that doesn't happen for a couple thousand years. Okay? But I'll tell you what, when the government started spending money in the national debt, you know what they said too? Oh, don't worry about it, we'll take care of this in 20 years. They said the same thing, I mean, when environmental issues started coming up. Oh, don't worry about it, we've got plenty of time to deal with this. So, but if this is global warming, though, welcome global warming. Sorry, Al Gore. Anyway, is there such a thing as primitive versus advanced culture? I saw a story, did anybody see this story the other day about this group in Peru, this untouched tribe? There's like a couple hundred of them that live. They've never had any real contact with modern people. They've been living the same way for like 6,000 to 7,000 years. It's fascinating to me as a sociologist. That how do you not have contact? Part of it is they're in a protected area, and that the park officials don't let people near them. But eventually they're going to run into these people. Now they're starting to log near their area, and they're starting to come out. Also, bigger divisions, the Middle East versus the West, or the developed world versus the developing world, or the Western world versus the Eastern world, or the Northern Hemisphere versus the Southern Hemisphere, or Europe versus Asia, or whatever. Okay? Number 5, how does culture change over time? Most people will tell you that it's generationally, through institutional change as well, by changes in the law, or changes in the stance of the government. You know, when the government made alcohol illegal, that was a cultural change as well. There's no doubt about it. The government supporting capitalism, it certainly supports elements of culture. And through individual interpretation, remember we talked about symbolic interactionism, why you don't believe exactly what your parents tell you, right? That you experience things at a different time frame, you grow up in a different cultural milieu, you're also impacted by your peer groups. Parents don't want to admit this, but by the time you're 11, peers become the #1 influence on your life. Studies have repeatedly shown this. And does your experience, is that what it sounds about right to you? 11, 12, you start to break away from your parents, start to develop your own identity, now your parents try to interfere, because if they find you hanging around a friend who they think is dangerous, going to introduce you to drugs or something, they will alter your behavior. But what are some of the things that parents do to kids at the age of 11 and 12 that is probably a big mistake that drives them away? Do parents loosen rules as you get older, or they tighten? On some things they tighten the rules, don't they? And they also do, I would say this is one thing that parents do that's probably a mistake. They invade their children's privacy. Don't think that when you went to school at some point during high school, your mom wasn't in your room looking. My mom used to do this stuff all the time. She'd say she was sweeping the floor. One time she wrote, I know this sounds weird, I wrote a paper on a controversial topic in my senior year of high school. She went to my room and read it, and then got on my case about what was in it. And at that point, I just stopped telling her things. Like, I'm not telling you. You know, it's like a boss. When you tell them stuff, you get in more trouble. It's like, now I'm just going to shut my mouth. You know, I'm never going to tell you anything again. But anyway, so that's an important aspect here of the generational change, that there's a distance between parents and kids, and some people say because you're the internet generation, that the generation gap's even bigger. Many times culture is forced to change by massive internal events like the Civil War, or externally forced events like international wars and depressions that are caused by global factors. Number 6, does culture move linearly towards a more and more improved state, like a view of progress, or does it move cyclically with periods of improvement, then decline, and improvement again, like the cycles of empires, and why does this matter? Why does this matter? Because the United States appears to be either in decline or at least going through some kind of process of reevaluation or reconfiguration. The United States was in a much better position in 1962 than it is right now. By a long shot. Except for we were embroiled in the middle of a Cuban Missile Crisis, but still. I hate to say this, but I would take the prospects of the Cold War and a complete annihilation over $15 trillion national debt. You could deal with the Soviets. Can't deal with $15 trillion. Where are we going to get that money at? I don't have any money to give to the government. They take enough out of me anyway. Go get it from Mitt Romney. He only took $5.6 million from him last year. Anyway, which that would really hurt if I had to write a $5 million check to the government. I'd want to jump off something. Maybe I'd get on a snowboard. Try to think I was Shaun White. Number 7, what role does culture play in the development of individual personalities? This is very important. And just as importantly, what impact do individuals have on cultural trends? Like great inventors, or even, or worse, tyrannical leaders like Hitler. Or even personalities like the Roosevelts, right? What impact does not only the office of the presidency have on culture, but who's in the office of the presidency? Or who do we elevate? Why do we elevate people like Paris Hilton and other people like that who have no discernible talent and yet are celebrities and everybody knows their names? You should ask yourself, why do you know these people's names? Kim Kardashian. What does she do for the United States? Is she an ambassador to China? She owns a manufacturing plant though, right? She makes a lot of stuff that goes to other countries that helps bring in foreign currency. Does she employ a lot of people? Is she a nice person? Surely she has good values. She's not materialistic, is she? She's a good person, right? You see? You should ask yourself why the culture focuses on these people. Is it a sign of the culture being vain? I don't know. Didn't she try to go on a diet or get plastic or something? I swear. Anyway, all these celebrities do this kind of stuff. But the point is that what sometimes who we elevate, the point I'm trying to make with that, I think you guys are figuring it out, is the point, who we try to elevate in society is also very much a reflection of the values of our society. Now, a lot of people don't like the fact that people like Kim Kardashian and Charlie Sheen and Paris Hilton and all these goofballs who really don't seem to have any real moral values, people don't like these people. But I would say, then why do people keep talking about them? They wouldn't have a reality show if people didn't watch them. Or worse, people like on the Jersey Shore. Is that what you want the rest of the world to think of America? Because that's what they think. That's what they see. They see the idiots on Big Brother. That's what they see. They see the Simpsons when they think about America. And in general have a negative view of American culture. They think it's shallow. They think it's ridiculous. They think it's hypocritical. They think it's backwards. Okay, especially French. French people. What's so funny is that they've helped us in so many wars, and we've helped them in wars, and they still have this snotty attitude. Like, and I'll tell you right now, with French people, they don't think anybody's culture is better than theirs. Anybody been to France? Almost every single one of those people, especially in Paris, speak English. If you go there and you don't speak French, are they going to speak English to you? Most of them won't, unless they're at the museum. And even then, when you walk away, they're going to say something about you in French. Like, what'd you just say? Oh, I was just saying, you know, have a good day. Anyway, I worked at Taco Bell one time in Arizona, and people would come in and not know that I know Spanish, and they would say stuff to me. I'd say, "Oh, hablo español." And their eyes would get real big. Like, oops. That wasn't a lot of people who did that, okay? But there were a few people who did that. But Americans do that stuff too. You tell me Americans are the nicest people to foreigners? Having said that, I would say, here's part of our culture. In this country, you can come to this country and be a citizen in 7 years. There are countries where you can have your family live in that country for 4 generations and you're still not a citizen. Like in Germany. If you're Turkish, you're not getting citizenship. Seriously. If you live in Japan and you're Korean, you can forget about ever being considered to be a Japanese citizen. And everybody criticizes the United States for your immigration policy, blah, 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 blah. Let me tell you the rest of the country. They treat foreigners 1,000 times worse than Americans do. Seriously. You think you go to China, you're going to move there, and everybody's just going to invite you in your house and treat you well? Or go, what's this guy spying on us? We let people come over here and get advanced degrees, start businesses. How many 7-Elevens have you seen that were owned by foreigners? Or fast food restaurants. We don't put limits on that stuff. In other countries, if I went to China and tried to buy a Subway, they would go, get the hell out of here. Okay, so as much as America gets criticized for certain aspects, I think it's somewhat unfair. Anyway, number 8, culture is both a benefit and challenge to society, setting the rules and paths that govern our lives, and no society is without culture, and yet no culture is exactly the same. So there's an element of unity and diversity here in culture, and it's why it's such a fascinating subject, and frankly we could go on forever talking about culture. We don't have time to do that. Alright, let's move on to what the subject, I believe, for chapter 3 was. Which is social groups and formal organizations. Also on page 53, subcultures. So we're going to talk about that here in a second. So you might want to open your book to page 53. But we're going to talk about the difference between formal and informal organizations. Also this idea of why do like most fast food restaurants look similar? Why does Target and Walmart almost look like the same store? Why do most like family restaurants look similar? Why do phone companies offer a similar plan? Why do all cable companies almost offer a similar plan? This is called isomorphism, in that companies and organizations tend to take role models from other companies and then try and create a similar situation within them. And for example, one of the things that occurs is when an organization like that develops out of a subculture like the X Games, it starts to become more and more popular, it starts to become commercially successful. The Winter Olympics, for example, came in and said, oh, here's some money to be made. And even though they're supposed to be amateur athletes, I mean, come on, how's it amateur athletes when you have Michael Jordan playing basketball? I mean, give me a break. So first of all, the Olympics is a bit of a lie in and of itself. Those people aren't amateur athletes. And if you get your face, now they don't get paid for, I know that some people don't realize this, you don't get a dime for winning a gold medal. Not a dime, okay? And it's expensive to go to the Olympics. Most of the time you can get funding from the U.S. Olympic Committee, but you don't get money till you get on the Wheaties box. And if you're Michael Phelps, you probably shouldn't be smoking bongs in the basement, since they hurt your... Although, isn't it funny that he does advertisements for McDonald's? First of all, it's kind of odd that a top-tiered athlete would eat at McDonald's, but when you see the bong in his mouth, you can understand why. There are some places where it is not a logical, sober decision to eat there. White Castle's is probably on the top of the list. That's like getting a tattoo on your neck. Okay? It sounds good at the time until you wake up the next morning, and it's the same with White Castles, right? You know, on the flip side, it's a problem. Okay? It's cool when it's in your mouth. All right? Anyway, you know, alcohol actually numbs your taste buds. So anyway, so if you have to eat disgusting food, like on Fear Factor. Fear Factory, whatever the hell it is. The one where they made people eat rotten deer body parts, and I don't mean their nose. They had rotten eggnog. And I'm like, ew, and they're making them eat worms. And it's like, my God, is this what people are willing to do for money? I'd rather be poor and homeless than have somebody dump a bunch of snakes on top of me. I mean, what kind of... on national TV, it'd be bad enough you did it in the basement somewhere. Like, you ain't gonna tell nobody about this, right? Nah, come on, I just want to dump a bunch of cockroaches on you. And have you sit there for about 20 minutes. Don't tell nobody about this. These people do this on television. Talk about an issue with American culture. Anyway, so the definition of formal organizations, you can actually get an idea of this in this chapter. It talks about the differences between groups and organizations. Say groups within societies, they talk about primary groups, secondary groups, reference groups. But these are specifically organizations. For example, formal organizations are things like corporations. They're deliberately constructed for a purpose. They have formal written rules and goals and a mission statement. Even not-for-profit organizations like Amnesty International have a written statement. They have bylaws. They have elections for officers. But these are set down. They have a formal hierarchy. Here's the CEO, there's the COO, there's the CFO, here's the junior executives, here's all the lower level employees, here are all the other employees in the mailroom or in the janitorial services, okay? But there are clear lines of hierarchy, formalized, stated. When you go to apply for a job, it says exactly what your job title is, what your job responsibilities are, what your qualifications need to be, what the hours are, what the salary is. When you join a bowling team, that doesn't happen. Book club, I don't think they have bylaws. And if you do join a book club that has a constitution, you probably should think that whoever started it is probably a little anal retentive. Or that they've had issues in the past with book clubs. Like, you join a book club and they're like, all right, it's a $500 fine if you come to the book club and you don't have anything intelligent to say. Or that we have a 3-step procedure for getting rid of people. Sign this handbook. You see the stupidity of that, right? Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't rules in informal organizations. Like at a bowling team. You keep showing up late, they're going to throw you out. Right? Or if you're just bad at it, right? You keep getting a 60. A little bit of a joke with the president. He tried to make himself look like he was the average man in Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh, so he went bowling. He got like a 21.
Are you serious?
Look that up. You look that up. Look up Obama bowling in Pennsylvania. I want to see what his score was, if you can, for me. I swear it wasn't more than 30. And I've seen little kids get. I've seen kids that 2-year-old kids pushed a 7-pound ball like that. They got more than that. And it's like, if I was his advisor, I'd be like, Mr. President, I really advise against this. You don't know how to. Do you know how bad you have to be to get 37? Who here is going bowling? Probably most everybody. Who here has got over a 37? Was it the first time you bowled? How many people, what'd you get for your first time bowling? Because I don't know if I doubt it was his first time.
I think I got in the 50s.
Well, what does that say, though, about Obama, though, that he doesn't know how to bowl? Is bowling sort of a blue-collared sport?
Yeah.
Right? I guarantee he knows how to play golf. That's more of an elitist sport. It's not as much as it used to be. But let me tell you something. Golfing is expensive. Anybody want golfing? Even on a public course?
Yeah.
You got to have clubs. There's green fees. You usually have to rent some kind of a cart or something like that. The good thing is you can sit there. The good thing about golf on a public course is you sit there and get drunk the whole time. But it's probably not a good thing to give hard balls and metal sticks to people who are drinking, driving them around in a little cart. You know, I mean, I remember, I think we were driving around the cart and the balls were going everywhere. And I think one of my friends drove the cart and the cooler slid off the back and went all over the green. And, I mean, golf courses can be somewhat blue-collar environments too, certainly. So, but anyway, but that's interesting. So you see, sometimes something that looks like a good idea is not a good idea. But I don't think Obama would be in anybody's bowling team for a long time. Number 4, certified or legally protected by governmental and economic institutions and organizations. Meaning that, look, the government recognizes that IBM is a real corporation. There's paperwork filed with the government. You know, even if you run a business out of your house, you have to do this. But if you run a book club, you don't need to get permission from the local government. You know, all this other stuff. Even neighborhood watch programs are somewhat informal. Now, one of the things you need to get into your head is that all organizations, there's more like a continuum.
This is bad marketing.
Between highly formal and then informal. So on this side are just things like a group of guys getting together and playing poker or something like that, or some, you know, people getting together and going to a Broadway. Just a group of friends would be like a Broadway musical or whatever it is. Closer to here are things like book clubs where they stated rules and we meet at a certain time, or bowling teams, or even maybe some small like home businesses where you're not registering with the government, which is actually illegal. Like you sell cars, or like if you sell stuff on eBay. That's not a formal organization. You're not a formal organization. Okay? Or if you get piano lessons, you're not a formal organization. Although you may have formal contracts, right? You have an agreement. You know. Closer to here are stuff like homeowners associations, stuff like that. And then we start to get into more legitimate, hardcore, like long-term organizations, corporations, governmental units, police forces, security outfits, the military, all this stuff. Like, and the closer you get to this, like where do you think the military would be on level of formality? Here? Right. They got every rule in the book. You can't sneeze without filling out a form sometimes, you know, in the military. And one of the things that makes it really inefficient, the government in general is this way, right? I'm sure you guys see this at the university. If you have to change a class or something, or get a grade change, it is an ordeal through red tape, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably not but that's not nearly as bad. Anybody been to the DMV lately? That's always a fun experience, isn't it? And I think I mentioned this before. Before you wait in line, you have to wait in line to get a number, right? And then they don't call your name. You're not a name. It's 247 or whatever it is, right? And if you miss it, then they just go right past you and they go to the next person. Like if you're out going to the bathroom and they don't let you go back up there. A lot of government organizations like that. Things like doctor offices are very well run with the records and all this other stuff. Even places like if you look at like hospitals, those are very formalized. You have birth certificates, all these are procedures, the way you do things. Even fast food restaurants, right? Any kind of business, government organization. Okay. However, friends getting together snowboarding is not very informal. And if you actually look at what happened, the X Games started out as a bunch of people. They were mostly men, but there were women at the time who were into snowboarding. And does anybody here snowboard? Do skiers like snowboarders? No, they hate their guts because they screw the snow up completely. And they make these goofy jumps and they're always going everywhere. And in general, they view skateboarders as, or snowboarders as similar to skateboarders. That there's some kind of weird subculture. They have no respect for the rules of skiing. Skiing is a dignified sport that's been around for years and hundreds of years, and it's an Olympic sport. And you snowboarders are all just all in the damn way. And you're little punks, and you got your own little language, and you do a bunch of goofy stuff. Now that was in the past, although now there's a lot of skiers in Winter X, and it's changing a little bit. But still, as you're saying, they're not well accepted and they're not well respected, and people don't like the fact that they tear the damn snow all to pieces, and they don't like their attitude either. They perceive them to be lower class people. Which is funny because what's a snowboard cost? Anywhere from $8,000 to probably $4,000 or $5,000. Yeah, so I don't think a lot of homeless people are going snowboarding or a bunch of punk rockers and things. Now, skateboard on the other hand, you can get a good skateboard for what, $100? And what kind of attitude do most adults have towards skateboarders and people who's nowadays? There's a lot like in Port Jeff. There's a skateboard park. It's run by it's actually, I think, a private company. My hometown of Columbus is one run by the city.
And also like a season pass is like $1,200. It's a lot of money.
Yes, there you go. Whereas the skateboard park's probably a lot less. But in general, what is the attitude that people have towards skateboarders? Is Tony Hawk considered to be kind of elegant and upper class? Does he eat a lot of caviar? Even though he probably has $200 million. This is a point also of economic class. How are skateboarders viewed? Let me put it this way. If you have 5 kids, or just young adults, skating at the mall, grinding rails, is that going to draw attention? In a bad way? Who's going to show up and tell these people to leave?
Cops.
Security guards, police, maybe some citizens. Get the hell out of here, you little punks! It's your attitude. Partly because skateboard was coupled with punk music. To be a skateboarder was to rail at society. It got tied up into anarchy and punk rock and all this other stuff that people in general didn't like. If you ever saw skateboarders from the 1980s, they often had crazy hairdos and they wore nutty clothes and they didn't give a damn about breaking their fingers or busting their face. One of the things that, did you watch the Winter X Games? Did you see the snowboarding street? Not a single one of those competitors were wearing a helmet, except for the dude who busted his head and looked like he was in worse condition than Sidney Crosby, who's been sidelined as an NHL player for months.
A lot of them don't even wear helmets like when they practice.
And they were, but the problem was this wasn't snowboarding on the course where there were no metal bars, and they were snowboarding on rails and stairs, and they had a big container and a ramp, and one of the guys kept trying to do this one thing where he was trying to get his snowboard, the front of it on the rail, and his head kept like coming down like that on the ground. And for most people that is bizarre behavior. They don't want their kids to behave that way, they don't want them to behave that way, and it is frightening. They don't want to encourage anybody. And what's worse, what does the X Games say about that type of behavior? And not only is it cool, but you can make a living at it. It's like the World Series of Poker. A lot of parents cannot stand that that's on ESPN. And let me tell you something. The biggest one-day sports payoff was the World Series of Poker. I think the dude won $27 million in one day. One day like that. The only one that was even close were golf tournaments. Even the U.S. Open. When you win the U.S. Open tennis tournament, you know how much money you get? $1 million. That's it. That dude won 27 or something ridiculous $1 million or something like that. Look that up. Look up biggest payout in World Series of Poker for me, please. I appreciate that. That gives us some bonus points. Anyway. Alright, let's go. So, also formal rules and titles. Number 6, run by rules of rationale, thought, and logic. Number 1, ad hoc formation for informal organization. Said it just comes up to meet some need. Then number 2, lack of written rules. So there's not a constitution or bylaws, and therefore there's very little discipline of somebody if they do something wrong. And just as quickly as informal organizations can form, they can dissolve. Like if you actually look at it, some street gangs are closer to formal organizations than informal organizations. Some of them actually have written rules, I know, and they do it in code. And many times, guess where they put the code? Right there in their arm. This is who I am. This is what we believe in. There's little letters or symbols or something that stand for things. I'm telling you, a lot of God, what's the name of that? There's a gang, the Zetas. They put the Saint of Death on their arms. She's actually a female figure. It's like, so this is who I am. This is what I believe. Number 3, subcultural nature. That usually these groups only are impacted by or only formed by subcultural groups. They don't necessarily the mainstream in nature because they're smaller groups. Number 4, no certification or formal recognition necessary. You know, I mean, if you're having some friends over and you're serving them drinks and playing cards, you don't need a license to run that. But if you start to run a bar out of your garage, you need a license for that. That's the way it is. Number 5, more easily dissolved or created. Now, let's look at subculture of snowboarding. So, I think this is on page 53. On page 53, it says this. Subcultures can form around any interest or activity. Each subculture has its own values and norms that its members share, giving them a common identity. Each also has special terms that pinpoint the group's corner of life and that its members use to communicate with one another. Some of us belong to several subcultures simultaneously. As you can see from these photos, most subcultures are compatible with the values of dominant or mainstream culture. That they either don't violate enough rules to draw attention, or that if they do get attention, they're accepted by the mainstream. Let's look at skateboarding. In the past, it was much less acceptable. It has been more acceptable as time has gone on. They represent specialized interests around which its members have chosen to build tiny worlds. Some subcultures, however, conflict with the mainstream culture. Sociologists give the name counterculture to subcultures whose values, such as those of outlaw motorcyclists, or activities and goals, such as those of terrorists, are opposed to the mainstream culture. Countercultures, however, are exceptional, and few of us belong to them. Founding fathers technically belong to a counterculture. And you look at some of the pictures here, and some of the examples they give. Many times it circles around things like hobbies, or occupations, or race, or gender, or belief systems, or whatever. Did you find?
Oh, yeah.
What is that?
12.5 million.
What was it say?
For
Oh, for the payout.
for the payout.
$12.5 million for 1 day of work. Not bad. The only bad thing is you got to give like 35% of that to the government. It's kind of be painful. Yeah, that's a tremendous amount. Although that could be considered to be capital gains, so it might be taxed at 15%. So you get the Mitt Romney rate. Anyway, even things also like regional culture is a subculture, like Southerners have. And what's fascinating, if you take a place like Alabama, there's Alabama culture, and then there's Central Alabama culture, and then there's Mobile, Alabama, which is different. So even inside Mobile, there's the upper elite class of Mobile, and there's the working class, or the the college students who go there, right? or the tourists. So subcultures are multi-layered, and multiple of them intersect throughout, and it's quite fascinating to look at these things. And I think certainly one of the things that causes conflict within societies are many times the beliefs of these subcultures. But as far as snowboarding as a subculture, one of the things that happens is there becomes a real invested nature inside of a subculture for certain people. Some people really take the subcultures and it becomes the primary way they identify themselves. When you're a Hell's Angels, that's who you are. Okay? You can't take that identity off at night and go, okay, now I'm cool. Now I'm straight. Now I'm going to go over to the Kiwanis Club and go to the orphanage and read books to kids. That doesn't happen that way. If you're in a street gang, you're in a street gang. And not only do you look at yourself that way, but the rest of society looks at you that way. And many times, even if you try to get out of a subculture, are you going to be able to get rid of that label? It's hard, right? When you're a criminal, you're a criminal. You know, or if you're part of a criminal subculture. Okay? Similarly here with snowboarding and skateboarding, not in the sense of the criminal aspects, but that Tony Hawk's a skateboarder. It's his life. Shaun White is an extreme athlete. He started out only doing snowboarding and won a bunch of gold medals. And then all of a sudden he goes, you know what, I want to skateboard. So he started going to the X Games and he was kicking people's asses there. And you know how people are about people who always, especially if you're competing with Shaun White, you got to hate his guts. He's so good. And he got a 100 on one of his runs this last Winter X Games. And he's won Olympic gold medals too. And he probably makes $20 to $30 million in endorsements and combined with his prize winning. And you know, he is the face of snowboarding and becoming the face of skateboarding. But you know, like again, I bet most of you know who Tony Hawk is. In 1982, virtually nobody knew who Tony Hawk was. It reminds me of heavy metal music. Heavy metal music started out that way too. So did rap. Rap and heavy metal was never played on mainstream radio. You actually had to go get bootleg tapes that someone recorded at a concert, or go to an underground record store where they were pressing these things with small record companies like Megaforce and Interscope and places like that, and people like Rick Rubin, and then Russell Simmons and people like that got involved in it, and eventually it got caught by the mainstream media and got dragged out into the public. Even take a band like in the past, Insane Clown Posse, which stated their goal was to stick their middle finger up at society, and they sold out and eventually were on WWE wrestling. Trying to say they were unique and all this other stuff, right? Even Metallica, they testified against Napster.
That was just Lars.
Well, no, I think there was another one there too, wasn't it? Wasn't Hetfield there? Wasn't the lead singer there? And they cut their hair too. One of them's got a little spike in his chin like that. I think it's the one who took over Cliff Burton. I can't remember his name.
No, it's Kirk Hammett.
Oh, is it? Okay, no, he wasn't a band, but he's got a spike. You know, like some people have like it's a spike that hangs off of this thing. So he's probably still clinging to that reality. But even things like if you take a look at NBA players, that's a subculture, and it has changed over time. In the 1980s, you wouldn't dare see somebody with tattoos all over their body on a basketball court. You ain't gonna see that. And what's interesting about that phenomenon is hip-hop culture has invaded basketball. There's no doubt about it. And what has happened as well is as tattoos have become more normalized, basketball players have been a part of that. One of the reasons why tattoos of basketball players are so different than if, say, a hockey player or a baseball player gets a tattoo. Why is there a big difference there?
You can see it.
Yeah, I mean, NBA players virtually almost, I mean, they wear less clothes than people at the beach. You know, I mean, their shirts expose their entire upper arm and their entire leg system, and you can almost see like the size of their body too. And who's what? Jason Terry got a tattoo of the NBA trophy on his side before he won the finals, and he said he'd get it taken off if they lost. And luckily for him, they didn't, because that, I'm telling you, Jason, that would have hurt like nothing else in your life. I mean, they probably should have knocked you out. Removing a tattoo, they use usually a laser, and they burn it off. And it gets down 3 or 4 layers of skin, and it creates a scar and everything. I mean, the scar is probably worse than the tattoo. Maybe it's better just to keep it and make jokes about it or something like that. So, anyway, but again, sometimes these subcultures can be elite. Sometimes they can be considered to be blue collar, or sometimes they're middle class. Sometimes they're considered to be disruptions. Other times they're considered to be interesting and all this other stuff. Or take a look at Hollywood. Most people look at Hollywood like a degenerate, deviant subculture. Charlie Sheen beating his wife, wrecking hotel rooms at the plaza, doing 7 grams of cocaine with supermodels and having them being taken off to the hospital, and then the police come and take his kids away. I mean, is that a successful human being? Sounds like a disaster. But do we call Charlie Sheen on this disaster? No, because he has $250 million. And his father's Martin Sheen and his brother's Emilio Estevez. So Hollywood celebrities are allowed to get away with weird behavior. That's what I love. If you are famous and well-liked, and many times wealthy, you don't always have to be wealthy, and you do something weird, you're eccentric. or interesting. If you're poor and powerless and you do something weird, you're a deviant and a freak, and you risk being arrested or ostracized. So, anyway, so the subculture of snowboarding, the snowboarding way of life came about as a natural response to the culture from which it emerged. Early on, there was a rebellion against skiing culture, and the view that snowboarders were inferior, skiers did not easily accept this new culture on their slopes. The two cultures contrasted each other in several ways, including how they spoke, acted, and their entire style of clothing. Snowboarders first embraced the punk and later the hip-hop look into their style. Words such as dude, gnarly, and shred the gnar are some examples of words used in snowboarding culture. And they use words like reverse cab 720 and all this frontside air stuff that if you don't know what the hell they're talking about. Look, the only thing I can tell you is that I know a good run when I see one on the half pipe. Like when Shaun White did that 100, you could just tell they were going to win. I mean, Shaun White gets a lot of consideration because of who he is. So I'm not sure if exactly he deserves 100s and all this stuff, but people love him. It's hard to compare him to somebody else that gets favoritism. Maybe especially Jets and Giants fan, Tom Brady, accuse him of getting favoritism. I don't think so. Usually the reverse in football. Usually people like James Harrison get fined because of their attitude, or the Raiders get penalized because of the Raiders. Anyway, snowboarding subculture became a crossover between the urban and suburban styles on snow, which made an easy transition from surfing and skateboarding culture over to snowboarding culture. The early stereotypes of snowboarding have been known to be lazy, grungy, punk, stoners, troublemakers, and numerous others, many of which are associated with skateboarding and surfing as well. Surfers are looked at like weirdos too, right? And they have different priorities, you know. Most people run from the beach when there's a hurricane. Surfers run away from the beach. Surfers run to the beach. I was in Virginia Beach when there was a major tropical storm coming in, and it was March, and people were out in dry suits in 12 to 20 foot waves, going. And I remember I was watching this, and this guy comes up behind me, and he stands there, and I figure he's watching this too, and he turns to me and he goes, "You getting in?" I was like, "No." Like, and there's other people like the Polar Bear Club and stuff like that. Sorry, this phone's all messed up. Does anybody know what the Polar Bear Club does?
They jump into the freaking water on a Super Bowl Sunday.
Well, just during, I don't know if everybody does it in Super Bowl Sunday. Like if you're, but it's all over the country too. Wisconsin, Lake Erie, all that. They jump in ice cold water at some point in the winter and take a swim. And they think this is invigorating. It's like a challenge, and it's just unique. Other people, it's insane, you know. And just like surfing, it seems. Jerry Seinfeld once said, "What the hell are these people doing? Don't you understand that the ocean doesn't want you there? It keeps throwing you out." And I'll tell you right now, surfers are the most likely people to get attacked and killed by sharks. Because they look like seals from below, especially if you're great white sharks. And the thing is about, first of all, sharks really don't, supposedly, except for maybe tiger sharks, which will eat just about anything, including tin cans. Sharks, supposedly, according to scientists, don't like the way human beings taste. It probably has to do with stuff we eat. They also like food that's more high in fat. That's why they go after whales and seals. And sharks don't, great whites particularly, don't eat their food immediately. They strike it to test it, to see if it's edible, and then come back. The strike's enough to kill it, cut it in half, and then come back and eat at their leisure. And then blood all over the place. And what they do is they come up and they strike a surfer, and they're just testing it. But when it's like what your dog does when it bites your hand, it's trying to taste it and stuff. But the problem is, great white sharks, their mouths are this big, and when they bite you to test you, it's over. They either sever your leg, you're lucky to make it to shore, or they cut you in half. And surfers put up with this so they can ride the waves. And the places where there's the best waves, usually are the most sharks. Like in San Francisco, or out by the Farallon Islands and stuff. And up in Hawaii where there's tiger sharks everywhere. Which, I'll tell you right now, tiger sharks are probably as aggressive, if not more aggressive, than white sharks. And they will eat people. They have no qualms about that whatsoever. I mean, you're talking about an animal that eats tin cans. What the hell does it care what you taste like? You know, they eat license plates. They pull unbelievable things. Oars, all kinds of stuff out of tiger sharks. They'll eat anything. They're like the garbage disposal of the ocean. I'm telling you. So are white-tipped oceanic sharks. Like if you have a shipwreck, the white-tipped oceanic sharks are going to show up, and they're going to start eating people's legs. So, but surfers are willing to put up with this so they can ride the wave. And if anybody ever seen the ones on the North Shore? Anybody ever seen these pictures of these guys surfing on the North Shore where the waves are literally 40 to 50 feet high? The people look like this. The waves like up here. The people look like this. The waves are so big they have to have jet skis tow them out past the break. And a lot of people get seriously injured, and some people have been killed, and people still go out and do it. Another example of like extreme stuff are base jumpers. What's base jumpers? Anybody know what that is?
Jumped out of parachute, right?
Well, I think it stands for, maybe you want to look this up, I think it's buildings. The A stands for, I can't remember. I know the S stands for span, and the E stands for earth. I can't remember what the A stands for. They jump off of buildings, bridges, bridges. I can't remember what A stands for. And they jump off of buildings, bridges, off of cliffs, and all kinds of stuff like that. I think maybe S stands for skyscraper or something. What?
It says A stands for antennas.
Oh, so antennas. What does S stand for skyscraper?
Spans.
Okay, so that's bridges, and then what's E's earth?
Yeah.
And so you have to do this to be in the club. And most of the time you got the parachute in your hand. And let me tell you something. Do you think it's legal to jump off of antennas
No, I can't do that.
in buildings?
No.
You think that'll go over well with the building's owner and with the police and with the local authorities, that some, in their minds, an idiot thinks he's Spider-Man and wants to jump off a building? Wasn't there a case of there wasn't some dude that climbed the buildings dressed like Spider-Man with like suction cups? I mean, that kind of stuff, most mainstream people look at that and go, man, what the hell happened to that kid when he was young? You know, did you get dropped on the head when you were younger? I mean, but to these people, they're inside of this subculture where it defines it in a positive way, that they're rewarded for taking these risks. Right? Let's take a look at even a sport. In hockey, it's illegal to fight. Yet it's part of the game, isn't it? It's part of intimidating your opponent. And to have your front teeth knocked out, like Ovechkin has, is a badge of honor. That means you're tough. Okay? It's not ugly to them. Okay? Broken hands, all that other stuff. Okay? Although it's probably getting in the way of the game to some people. Anyway, snowboarding has become a sport that encompasses a very diverse international-based crowd and fan base, so much so that it's hard to stereotype such a large community. Reasons for these dying stereotypes include how mainstream and popular the sport has become, with the shock factor of snowboarding's quick takeoff on the slopes wearing off. Skiers and snowboarders are becoming used to each other, showing more respect to each other on the mountain. The typical stereotype of the sport is changing as the demographics change. To show you, though, also, that when an upstart organization comes up that it represents a subculture, it impacts pre-existing, more mainstream institutions like the Olympics. And we call this isomorphism. The Olympics looked at the Winter X Games and said, hey, we're losing viewers, we're losing money and advertisers, we're losing athletes to these sports. We got to do something. So what did the Olympics do? They sucked up these events. Snowboarding since 1998, 6 men and women's parallel giant slalom, half pipe, and snowboard cross. This in X Games is called Snowboarder X. It's the one Nate Holland won. Okay. So, but if you look at these organizations are completely different, although they have a lot of similarities as well. The Olympics was founded in 1924. It actually goes back, obviously, to Greece. The number of games held, I think this was, this includes 2010, so 21. And they're going to have, this is the Winter Olympics. They're going to have the next one in Sochi, Russia, in 2014. And Shaun White's going to be there. You can better believe it. And he'll probably win a gold. And so Seth Westcott and all these other, Kelly Clark will be there, all these people. I don't know about Hannah Teeter. What's interesting as well is during one of the snowboarding events, Lindsay Jacobellis crashed in the last second and cost herself a gold medal, and she had that happen several times. And the one thing about the Olympics is if that happens, it's only every 4 years. Although they had a Winter Olympics in '96 and then in '98. And the reason why they did that is, it used to be, when I was younger, the Winter Olympics occurred in the same year as the Summer Olympics. But they thought that, hey, we'll get more ratings and people to come to them if we separate them out, so if you want to go to both. And so in 1996, after the Atlanta Games, and I can't remember where the Winter Olympics, maybe it was in Utah or something, and the United States has hosted a lot of Winter Olympics and a lot of U.S. Regular Olympics. Like we had it in Atlanta, we had it in Los Angeles in '84, you know, and I think in the '60s at one point as well. But so they held Winter Olympics in '96, and then 2 years later they held it in 1998. And the only reason why they didn't do the Summer Olympics, the Summer Olympics is an ordeal. It has way more events in it, and they have not taken in skateboarding, and they probably won't, although it may change. And they have not absorbed one single event from the X Games, because the things in the Summer X Games are weird. They race around in cars, they're on BMX bikes, they're on skateboards. Anybody ever seen Travis Pastrana? He did a double backflip on a motorcycle. That's not going to happen at the Olympics. Okay. I want to see the Winter X Games absorb something like extreme bobsledding, where like you have to stand up or something, like, you know, or luge where you stand up. You ever seen luge? That's the thing where you sit on the sled. And there's the other one, sculling, where you're laying with your head towards the thing, and they're doing like 80 miles an hour and stuff like that. You ever seen the videotape of the Jamaican bobsled? You seen Cool Runnings too? Poor people. The only reason why they did that is that they knew there was no Jamaican bobsledding team, and the Jamaicans had never really fielded a Winter Olympic for obvious reasons. They're in the Caribbean, and there's no real mountain ranges in Jamaica. And they thought, well, if we can at least do this, we'll go to the Olympics, because there's nobody else in Jamaica that's going to qualify. It's not like they had to go. In the United States, if you want to be in the bobsledding team, you have to go through qualifications for like years, and you have to do well. And even the best people in bobsledding don't get in because they don't qualify that day. But if you see here, they have absorbed events from the X Games, like I mentioned. Also, Olympic medalists that are, these were not Olympic athletes beforehand. They came directly over from the Winter X Games. And you see the Olympics was trying to pull them in and offer them a lot of stuff. And a lot of them, though, have said that because the X Games was the original one, they'd rather have a Winter X Games medal to some extent. Although if you talk to Kelly Clark and Shaun White and the rest of them, they still love their Olympic. They're not giving their Olympic gold medal away, but they don't see it the same. It doesn't have quite the same meaning, but it does mean a lot to them. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. And I'll tell you right now, privately, I think probably some of them are giving lip service to the X Games, and really they were much prouder of the Olympic medal than they were the Olympics. Because it's one of the reasons, every 4 years, it's an older organization, it's watched by a lot more people than the Winter X Games. The Winter X Games averages, as you see there, attendance of about 100,000. It's hard to tell what the ratings are. It probably doesn't get a lot of ratings. Like, how many people here didn't even know that it took place last weekend? How many people didn't know the Winter X Games was last weekend? So a fair amount of people. How many people did know it? The rest of you just not care. Anyway. I doubt any of you didn't know there was an Olympics. Okay? And I bet most of you could name 5 or 6 Olympic athletes off the top of your head. Name me 5 Summer X Games athletes, besides Travis Pastrana.
I can name you like a lot of snowboarders, but that's it.
You don't watch the Summer X Games? Are you stupid?
No, I'm just really looking into snowboarding, so I just really watch that.
Yeah, and like I said, the Summer X Games, I actually like the Winter X Games more. The Summer X Games got too much mechanized machinery. Too many motorcycles, too many damn cars. And although I like to see people do crazy things on motorcycles, you know, it's not my thing. I like the skateboarding stuff. The Summer X Games has had several people getting killed, particularly on motorcycles. They do these backflips and stuff. I mean, look, motorcycles are unstable when they're on level ground doing 25 miles an hour. You start to go flipping up in the air in 40 different ways and kick your leg off and all kinds of stuff. It's insane. So, and I told you Sarah Burke died. She was 30 years old. She died on, Sarah was a skier, right? Yeah. She didn't have a winter, she didn't have an Olympic medal though, did she? I don't think she did. I think she's competed there though, because she's a skier particularly.
But Kevin Pierce, he like hit his head on the half pipe, the same one as Sarah. He was wearing a helmet. And he can't snowboard like ever again or anything.
Right, and there have been several other instances. People have major spinal injuries, paralyzed, all kinds of things like that. This isn't some, but that happens at the Olympics too. But if you actually look at it, there are virtually no Olympic athletes that started out like Lindsey Vonn. Do you know who Lindsey Vonn is? She ain't coming over here. It ain't happening. Okay, very few of these athletes, if any of them, are going to come over here, unless they started here. Because it's still a subculture and it's still not accepted.
I've wondered, like, how do a lot of the snowboarders, like, compete in the Olympics if they've been, like, arrested? I know a lot of them have been arrested for, like...
I don't think that matters
For, like,
as long as they can
possession of
pass the drug
marijuana.
but that's meaningless to the Olympics. And the proof is that in, I can't remember what year it was, I want to say the first year in 1998 when they had the super pipe competition, a Canadian snowboarder won it. Marijuana at the time was decriminalized in Canada and in most of Europe, so how can you drug test a European athlete from the Netherlands for marijuana? When they can not only get that, but mushrooms and a whole bunch of other crap. You go down to red light district and get anything you want. And it makes Amsterdam's probably one of the only cities that would make Las Vegas blush. Okay? They got hookers standing in windows in Amsterdam, just going, hey, come on in. You know, I mean, seriously. And drugs, I'm talking any drug you want on the streets. So how do they do that? And one of the things they found, they said was, the Olympic Committee actually ruled on this. The Canadian snowboarder won the gold medal. He was the first winner of this, I think it was the super pipe, or they called it the half pipe at the time. They test athletes after they win a medal, or after the pre and post, and it's random too, so they don't know when it's going to happen. He tested positive for marijuana. He admitted to the committee that he used it. The committee at first stripped his gold medal away. Then he appealed the decision with the claim that marijuana was not a performing-enhancing drug. The committee agreed with him, gave him his gold medal back. They said, you know what? You're right. It probably hurt your performance that you were stoned. And if you actually ask snowboarders, I bet some would be like, I'm way better when I'm high. I'm creative, my body's loose. You're telling me that Shaun White's never smoked pot in his life? I mean, the Michael Phelps stuff's nothing compared to what this is what I love. They get on Michael Phelps' case for having a picture taken with his face next to a bong, and there ain't even no smoke coming out. We don't even know if he took a hit. We don't even know if it was weed, although you don't smoke tobacco out of a 4-foot bong or a 3-foot bong. But we know that most of these Winter X Game athletes that come to the Olympics smoke weed. Nobody gives them any crap. Nobody gets on Shaun White's case about that kind of stuff. Just like we don't get on Lady Gaga's case because she's a rock star about admitting that she did drugs. Or Seth Rogen for admitting he was stoned every time he wrote a screenplay. So it's interesting, this sort of a double standard. If Lindsey Vonn smoked weed, that'd be a big story. Seriously. Her divorce was as big as a story. Anyway. So again, this is held every 4 years. Number 6, it's more formalized and traditional. That's why Winter X Games athletes don't like it. It's all stuffy. It's like, those of you who are tennis players, it's like Wimbledon. People don't like to go to Wimbledon because they make you wear all white, and it's stuffy, and the stupid monarchs are in their box, and you have to bow to them, and dumb stuff. Andre Agassi hated Wimbledon. He refused to go the first 3 or 4 years, and then the first or second time he went the damn thing. And it was his first Grand Slam final. So, but Wimbledon is like that, whereas the U.S. Open is big and loud and raucous, and there, people. It's more informal and it's more relaxed. It's like American culture. I mean, British people, Wimbledon is played at the All England Lawn and Tennis Club. I mean, it is an exclusive country club. The United States Tennis Academy runs that venue, and if you want to go over there and play tennis right now, you can. Although it's probably 45 degrees. I don't know about that. Although, I remember one time when I was in Alaska, we went and played tennis when it was 20 below. I don't know why or how, but that's the stuff you do when you're young, though. Anyway. Individuals represent their country here. They don't in the Winter X Games. Although they do list their country, they don't necessarily, I don't think they play the national anthem for each country. Considered to be desirable to have an Olympic medal, but the Olympics is seen as mainstream, corrupted, and uncool by Winter X Games athletes. The Winter X Games was founded in 1997. This has only been around for a little while. The number of Winter X Games is 15. Shaun White has 11 gold medals, both in slopestyle and super pipe, in both Olympic sports, slopestyle and snowboard cross. These are slightly different, but they're similar. Slopestyle again and snowboard cross are in the Olympics, and I can't remember how many winter. No, I think I listed here. Shaun's got 2 Winter Olympics gold medals. Not that he needs any more money. And I'll tell you right now, one of the things you look at, and if we have, I don't know if we have time today to show you this. I think we do. I'll show you these people who are doing this snowboard street stuff, which is brand new and is not really accepted. They showed clips of people. This guy was on top of a parking garage that was 3 stories high and jumped off of it onto a ramp doing some tricks. The other one where he was on top of like an elevated roadway and there was this gap where there was a building right here, and there was a gap down in here that led to the bottom of the street. He jumped over the rail, hit the wall, slid off the wall, and came down. And when parents are concerned when they see stuff like that, why? Huh?
They don't want their kids doing that.
Right, and worst of all, because these guys are so good, they make it look easy. Like it's no big deal. And you remember Justin Hoyer, who was holding his arm like this? Remember the guy who tried to do the double backflip on the snow machine? Or snowmobile? That's what happens. He's one of the best in the business and he almost killed himself. What chance do you have? And I'll tell you right now, look, Sonny Bono got his head blasted open on a ski course. And he'd probably been skiing for 20 years. One of the Kennedy kids got killed on the ski slopes too. It wasn't John's son, I think it was one of Bobby's sons. Skiing's dangerous. Okay? That's why I went water skiing. It's hard to get hurt when you smack in the water, although it will pull your eyelids up and stuff. It still hurts when you hit the water doing 45 miles an hour. But it's better than hitting concrete or snow. Anyway, TV ratings and sponsorship is high. Attendance in 2011 is over 100,000 actual attendance at the event. It used to be held in different places. They did hold it in Vermont at one point, and they've held it in California a couple times, and now they hold it in Aspen, Colorado. And why is that? Why is it funny that a subcultural organization would hold their main event in Aspen? What's the class level in Aspen? It's up. That's about as upper class as you can get. I mean, Prince William has a house in Aspen. I mean, you name any celebrity in the world, and they got a house in Aspen, or rent a chalet or something. Aspen is it. I mean, it's expensive. Do you know how expensive it is?
What?
You ever looked into skiing in Aspen?
Yeah, it's expensive. I mean, you have to fly out there and everything. So.
And the hotel's probably it's like $500-600 a night probably. There are no one-star hotels in Aspen. It's so bad in Aspen that the people who work at like the local restaurants have to live like 60 miles down the road because they can't afford to rent anything in Aspen. Sort of like the Upper West Side or something like that, or San Francisco or something like that. It's expensive. Okay? Anyway. Individuals are identified by their nationality, but they do not compete for their nation, and the national anthems are not played. Grew out of informal groups of snowboarders who created these new events and tricks. Grew out of the skateboard phenomenon in the late 1980s and beyond with the original X Games. And these guys also, Shaun White and the rest of them, they do what's called extreme off-course skiing and snowboarding, where they go out in the middle of nowhere and sometimes get dragged up on the top of like a crazy-ass mountain that's where an avalanche is about ready to happen, and they get dropped off by helicopters, like hanging off the side, and they get dropped off and they just slide down these mountains and like jump down 30, 40 feet gullies and all kinds of stuff, and they sell these videos. Okay, I saw one where this one guy jumped, he landed, he was on skis, his ski hit into a hole, and his chin went down, and his knee hit his chin, and it blew 3 or 4 of his teeth out, shattered his jaw, he bit his tongue almost in 2 places. And he was in the hospital with a broken jaw for a week or so. So it's pretty crazy. Anyway. So here's isomorphism. This idea is a theory that organizations will come to resemble each other in form, rules, goals, and behaviors over time. There are 3 main ways this occurs. Coercive. More powerful organizations force others to adapt and become like them, which that's not necessarily going on with the X game. Mimetic. This is more what's going on here. That the Olympics looked at the Winter X Games and said, hey, if we mimic them, we can get their audience. Letter C here, normative. Organizations do what they feel is normal or expected of them. The Winter X Games didn't do that. This is also part of what happened with the Winter X Games. Grassroots co-optation. More powerful, more traditional organizations adapt to change, like how Google bought YouTube and Fox bought MySpace and then ruined it. And how now Facebook's going public. And respond to sociocultural changes and grassroots organizational threats by co-opting the most successful elements of a new emerging organization. As in sports and society, like for example the Whig Party, the Reform Party, the co-op, these were third-party movements, and they got co-opted by the other 2 parties. The co-optation of surf and skating subcultures, the drug subculture gets. Look, marijuana is virtually not deviant anymore. Drug use for young people, even if it's hard drugs, is not as looked upon the way it used to be. Okay? Underage drinking. That's almost a game with the cops now. Right? That's part of the thrill. Like Superbad. That whole movie is about how to get alcohol when you're in high school with a fake, remember the McLovin fake ID? And like how this is how teenagers, every word out of Jonah Hill's mouth in that movie is a cuss word or some reference to sex. He uses probably 15 different words to describe a female's body parts. They start discussing sexual lube, all kinds of stuff like that. So these things come out in the media particularly. The Olympics and the X Games, Microsoft with the Xbox, they co-opted the video game culture to some extent. Grunge fashion and the Burning Man. The Burning Man was an event that was a grassroots event out, I think, in the desert of Nevada or something like that, where it was sort of like a pseudo-hippie festival where people got naked and they do drugs and drink and they burn this big thing that was like a man and it would be fun. But the corporations came in and took it. Or Woodstock. Remember Woodstock 94, 99, where it became a corporate thing? So anyway. Alright, we're running out of time, so I'll show you the other videos next time. But I do want to end the class. Where's this thing? I do want to end the class with a little bit of Shaun White here. What, the concepts? You guys confused? Oh, okay, I'll go back over. Alright, I'll actually show you this since we're running out of time. This is Shaun White's 100. And also his 5th X Games medal, gold medal. So ask yourself, would you do this?
Level of dominance with the 5B.
Or is this normal behavior?
And with this win, as expected,
He already won the...
top 10 trending.
He basically wrapped the gold medal up right here.
And see if he throws that.
He didn't need to do this.
Front side double cork 1260.
He's about 18 feet in the air right there. Look how easy he makes that look. You do that, you're going to die. I'm telling you, or get really hurt. You're going to be hurt. Look at that. Just like he's tying his shoes. Ain't nothing. I'm telling you, there's 7 billion people on this planet. There's probably maybe 1,000 that can do that.
Wow. That is why this dude is Shaun.
Dude. Alright, so there you go. We'll continue with a little bit. I want to show you some of the recs next time. Then we'll move on to talk about social class in America. So keep up on the readings. Everybody have a good weekend. Go Giants. Because I don't like the Patriots. Sorry, Patriots fans. It's not your team. It's Tom Brady. I just don't like him. Who? Sarah?
No, like actually just a
Who?
Louis Vito, there's
Right.
Odd.
Nate Holland. And his number, right? He won, what, 6, I think, 6, oh no, I think he's got 8. Something ridiculous like that. And here's the other thing. The X Games has impacted the Olympics. Shaun White's won an Olympic gold. There's been a lot of, Seth Westcott won a gold medal in the Olympics.
Some of them say they actually, like, to win the X Games, it's...
Well, the X Games means more because it's part of their subculture, where the Olympics, and we'll talk about this, the Olympics is sort of like the establishment. They're like the old crotchety institution that said you don't have to do it this way. You know, there's a lot of events in X Games that will never get into the Olympics, especially Winter X Games. Things that have to do, or especially in summer. Summer X Games use rally cars. They use BMX bikes. That's never going to get into the Olympics. Stuff like snowmobile racing. To show you, I think this is interesting. To show you how crazy these guys are. To show you the difference, since we are talking about culture, I do want to show you this before we leave. All right, here is Justin Hoyer on a snowmobile trying to do a double backflip, and he wrecks. So watch this. Where's the volume?
You could tell, like, from the start he was going way too slow.
Yeah, it seemed like he wasn't sure what he was doing. And he was scared a little bit. Here's the volume.
A little bit of hesitation, not quite the pull off of the lip.
Ask yourself, would you do this?
If it's not ultimate.
And I guarantee he's going to get right back on the sled. Watch this.
Yeah,
That's a 450-pound machine. Watch his arm. Watch it. He's trying to get back up.
It was a little bit.
Look at his arm.
Slow, and unfortunately, the second
one,
one,
like this.
You know, it just wasn't.
And he falls down right there. And his wife and his dad were over on the side watching it. Watch.
And he knew.
He knew he was coming down.
It could have been a lot worse.
Drove that right arm into the snow, and
Joe, I
when he
can
got up
update
there,
real quick.
he was indicating to his right arm. So
Boy, he really was close.
He ain't crying though.
You know,
And he's
that's
probably
the
proud
problem
that he
with
tried
that.
it.
There's
Now, people say, well, why would you do such a thing? Why would you do such a thing and risk your life? Here's why you do. Heath Frisbee, on the other hand, right after this dude wrecked, right after this guy wrecked, he goes and does a front flip, which has never been done on a snow machine. Watch this. This is quite impressive. Can somebody get the light back there for me?
We pick our tricks early in the year, and I knew that a couple of guys were doing double flips, and I knew what they were capable of.
history is what it's all about here tonight. Next snowmobile best.
These guys don't get paid $20 million a year.
A front flip's a wild card, but if I do it, there's nothing that's going to touch it.
And why is he going to do this? Nobody else has. Watch this.
You
This
can't
is
ever
crazy.
say
This is even crazier on some
no,
levels.
it's not possible.
Double back.
No, you can't do that. Anything is possible.
come on, Heath.
I doubt there's a single person in this class that would even attempt that. I wouldn't even go off the ramp. Just like jump off. I wouldn't even do that. And look at him now. Everybody loves him. He's great at that. And that was right after that dude broke his arm doing the double
It was
backflip.
just truly about achieving a goal.
And he even came up to him and like, aren't you scared to do this right? He's like, no.
Come out and do
I'm
it.
going to do it anyway. I don't pay attention to that.
Would be the first, besides Heath Frisbee, to do it
And he won a gold medal.
on a snowmobile. This is truly a breathtaking event for him.
No one can explain the feelings athletes get. When we go out there, it is the worst feeling in your stomach and your head, everything, and I just knew that I had to stay focused, and I knew that I trained for this, and I knew what to do.
It's just crazy because every year you have to step your game up and you have to try something else and you have to move to the next thing. And where does it go? Nobody knows. That's just, I guess I'm just gonna have to.
Alright. Let's leave it there. I want to come back to this later. I want to show you the wreck that Shaun White got into in 2010. He almost killed himself. And he still went back out there and won the gold medal after he busted his face to pieces. Alright, we'll continue with our culture thing. Here's the other one we're going to do on Thursday. So keep up with the readings and have a good day, and I'll see everybody later. Turn that light on for me, please. Anyway, again, that's our conflict theory's perspective. It's not my perspective. But again,